But if you are growing food, at some point you're going to have an abundance of something, and it's figuring out what to do with it and how to make it interesting so that you're not eating, 42 jars of just pickled garlic cakes. Although that's nice for us because we have lots of other people that can share in that. But it's nice to figure out other ways of preserving food. Like this year, I experimented a little bit with garlic scapes because again, we had an abundance, and I thought, well, what if I dehydrate them? It was an interesting experiment because I realized it didn't work. So garlic scapes are not really the greatest for trying to solar dehydrate. They end up, it's kind of cool, but it's not a very good end product. It would end up taking more processing. But what ended up happening was the flower head continued to, it's almost like it continued to sprout and grow, and it made all the little like garlic seeds on the flower head. So it was as if it were continuing to open and become a flower, which I thought was really fascinating. But in the end, it was sort of like, well, I have this kind of frumpy, kind of pinky colored thing with these seeds that still have sort of a husk on them. I can't really use it, so I ended up composting it, but it was a good experiment. So it's just, again, it's just this trial and error thing, knowing what to do to figure out what to do with the food. But yeah, there are many ways of preserving. Have folks done, I'm sure, a number of different things.
Oh yeah.
Like what?
Tomatoes, applesauce, spaghetti sauce.
So mostly like hot water bath canning.
A lot of hot water bath canning. Although now stocking up says even spaghetti sauce is not so hot for hot water bath canning. So
I just put that in Ziploc bags in the freezer.
a lot of that. Well, I do a lot of freezer. Like we just did up 8 quarts of spaghetti sauce this past weekend because sheep got into some of my tomatoes and we did some tomato salvage. We froze all of that this time around. I got the freezer space right now, and we'll probably all get used before. But yeah, a lot of hot water bath canning.
Yeah.
Some drying.
Drying.
Yeah.
So freezing. So
lots of fermenting.
Yep.
Starting with the sauerkraut class that I took here. So 4 or 5 years ago, been fermenting. I'm making sauerkraut real pickles, carrots, beets.
nice. Yeah, it's a really great way. Any other ways? How about just plain storage? That is a method of preservation. Just having a root cellar, or having a dry, dry cooler place, or a moist cooler place where you can store stuff. This book is amazing. If people haven't read that, it's just everything. And then they also have recipes in the back for other stuff as well. And I've actually experimented a little bit with preserving things in oil. I made we had tons of eggplant going out of our ears and ends and fingers and just slicing it up and letting it sit in salt, patting it dry, and then just covering it in oil, and it automatically marinated itself. And that is a shorter term preservation technique. It won't last, a year. Potentially. I guess it depends on how you're storing it, and if there's absolutely no air getting to it. But we consumed that within 2 months, and really delicious. And that came from this book, which is also a really good book, Keeping Food Fresh, and just figuring out ways where people didn't have the freezers, and so it's a lot of fermentation techniques and other techniques like using the oil. So
is the oil reusable?
Well, yeah. When you eat whatever you have preserved in the oil, then you can use the oil then, for cooking and that kind of thing. Yeah, but I probably wouldn't use it again to preserve it, but just probably cook with it. That is also a good book, Bill Mollison's Fermentation. And then this too, Sandor Katz has another book out, more recent that I don't have, but it's a very comprehensive book about fermentation from all over the world. I think it's called The Art of Fermentation. And then I like this book and this book because this one is just a kind of a collection of stories, and I'm sure there are other books out there too. We just happen to have this one in our library. And recipes in thinking about eating with the seasons and the cycles, and what our bodies are experiencing in correlation with what the earth is experiencing and what we're growing, and so she is writing and following actually the moon phases, which is very interesting, and has recipes that, I think there's like a mead recipe in there for a certain, like even I think it's even called the mead moon or something like that. So some pretty cool stuff. And then I really like this book, where you could find another sort of just encyclopedia type of book to just be, just have a better understanding of the actual ingredient, the food, the nutrients. By no means do I have I'm not a nutritionist, I don't have these books memorized, but every once in a while I'm like, well, what is, such and such a vegetable? What pepper and chili I just turned to right here? We're growing a lot of different kinds of peppers. How can the origins of this, and like what can that relate to as far as like the kind of salsa that I make or something like that. So just to give a nice, good, broad, just understanding of the food that we're eating. So I don't know if you guys noticed, but we have lots of apples. So we're working on apples, and I think, well, that was kind of fast. Does anybody have any thoughts?
You asked me, no.
Yeah. So I have come up with, some techniques that I really like, some based on books, obviously, and then also just based on what we got here on the farm. I've done a lot of stuff in this kitchen. I've also worked solely just at the cob oven. And then when we had the summer kitchen, when it's all equipped like that, sometimes I've done everything out there. And so it's been interesting over these, couple of years trying to figure out like where I like to be. And obviously this kitchen is the most comfortable only because I have access to the hot water. It's a lot, if I happen to need such and such a tool, I know I can grab it. But I also like using the cob oven, just because I don't know, it's the sidecar part where the two, the pots are, you can keep boiling for, kind of a continuous time. And if I'm doing a hot water boiling, it's kind of nice because I don't have to, keep the gas on the stove going, that kind of thing. I have to just put another little piece of wood in there, and it'll kind of simmer back up, and I can do a lot of stuff down there. But yeah, so we're going to work with some apples, and then in that giant pot, I've got cooked down apples and elderberries, and actually I've got the cob oven going, and while you guys were at Steve's house, I squeeze-o-matic'd some apples that I had cooked down the other day, and then I stuck in the cob oven, and those were slow cooking for a good portion of the day yesterday while the meat was cooking, and then overnight just staying warm in the cob oven, and it's making a really nice apple butter. And so we'll take that out, and I already sterilized some jars, and then what we'll do is fill the hot apple butter into the warm jars and then process those in a hot water bath for 15 minutes to seal the jars. That was like the quickest hot water bath overview, but we'll go over it again. So, and then the other thing I was thinking of what we would do is I'd like to dry some apples. I did some apple drying a couple years ago, and I'd like to try doing it a little differently this year using the cob oven. So once we get the apple butter out of there, we'll put a couple of trays of apples in there and keep the cob oven at just a really low temperature, well below 150 degrees, so that we're not actually baking the apples, but we're just, all the moisture is just evaporating. We're trying to just dehydrate them. But I've never done that before, so it might be a little tricky. The last time I did the dried apples, I just had them in the boiler room, which is warmer and drier than the rest of the house, but there were issues with just mold, and it just took a really long time. We didn't have there wasn't always a fire going down there, so it was a lot of just watching and throwing out some old apples and things like that. But
why not the dehydrator? The solar
dehydrator?
Yeah.
I think I would come across the same issue.
Okay, too slow.
Too slow, and I would like to have an actual sun dehydrator, though. Eventually make one of those. I've had this thought for a while, but we have these old cold frames, and they have just a really nice window on them, and if it's a sunny day, it's going to capture that sun a little more directly,
Right.
and might be able to do something like the apples maybe a little bit faster, and still be able to vent it, that kind of thing.
So with the sun drying, obviously there's a lot of sun drying techniques or whatnot. You've heard that historically. You just potentially might lose a little bit of the nutritive value. And it's also just a factor of our relative humidity. I mean, doing drying in California or doing drying in Argentina or doing someplace where it's just drier is a lot easier. Because we have high humidity rates here, particularly when our harvest is coming in. It's cooler weather. It's like this weather in the fall. The breeze helps a lot, but it's a matter of getting air circulation and the temperatures with the low humidity combination. So those three factors.
Yeah, we have the best success with drying stuff, like herbs and things like that. I did make raisins one time, but I gave in and got out the electric dehydrator, and that worked. But that was also an issue because there were bugs that were started crawling out of the. That was really interesting.
That's protein.
They
Out of
just
the
started
grapes?
cutting out of the grapes and crawling all over the dehydrator. I was like, oh no.
Yeah, it's hard because when the juicy stuff is ready here, it's not hot enough outside.
Yeah. So, what else have we dried? Dried mushrooms. That worked really well. I did that in the solar dehydrator. That worked great. And I dried garlic. I've dried that in the solar dehydrator and just in the oven.
Getting the bugs out is a big issue, particularly if you're not going to cook this stuff. I guess I've seen it at some points in times is just give it a little saltwater bath flush. No more or less putting the salty water, immersing it in it and keeping it below. Putting something over the top of it so it stays below the surface. And the bugs eject. And then you get, you then re-dry out the stuff. It's sort of a nice technique if you're about to cook it or about to use it because you get stuff wet again. It sort of defeats the purpose of harvesting stuff in dry weather and then moving on to the dehydration phase.
So, I don't think we'll be able to get the apples into the oven right away. Being here for just a little bit. So I have just like a little bit of lemon juice, like about 3 tablespoons of lemon juice and 4 quarts of water. And we can just put our apple slices in there for now to just, so they don't discolor and...
Stops the browning.
Yeah. And that's apples and elderberry. So, I think my idea is that a few people can be slicing up some apples. and a couple people can be taking turns on the squeezo and squeezoing.
I squeezoed all last weekend, so you can squeezo all you want.
What I did with this, this is going to be a lot more than I added.
This is a food mill.
This is a food mill, but I'm calling it squeezo. It's
Right,
like
the brand.
squeezo.
Right.
And what's nice about this is, all I did was chop up the apples and its skins and seeds and stems, everything together. Made it so much easier, and all that is going to just get squeezed out the other end of the food mill.
How long has that been sitting like that?
Oh, in the refrigerator since Wednesday. Smells good.
Yep.
It'll be fine because then we'll cook it again.
Okay.
Two factors of this I think I'd just like to bring up. One is the fermentation factor. And so in lots of
It's
these
got elderberries
preservation
in it.
techniques, we're actually looking for a little bit of fermenting. Particularly in like the sauerkraut and so forth, you're actually building nutrition through rotting it. Sauerkraut is rotten.
Smells like wine to me.
This,
I got some hot sauce going right now.
this,
The elderberry
I
does
think
give
the
it another
elderberry
salt.
is giving it sort of that other sort of.
particularly
Smell.
in this latitude,
There's no.
in the fall,
A little bit of brine and
fermented fruit is part of the name of the game.
Go back through that
As it
again.
falls to the ground around here, it starts to rot.
sauce.
And it's part of us.
that's what I do.
And it's a tradition.
Jalapenos because I just have like a bowl.
So do you harvest it off the ground too?
I got a banana peppers too.
Well, I think you want to keep your fruit clean as much as possible. You don't want to you want to clean your rocks and so forth.
Yeah, just salted.
But some of it for cider and stuff is perfect.
Yeah, I think it's about grading the apples as usual. This grade is between a keeper and a cider apple. This is an apple that's been bruised, and then you cut out the bad parts and then cook it down. So this isn't a keeper apple, but this isn't like a really terrible cider apple.
Like a rubber one in that chop drawer there, yeah.
So now we're doing this for what reason now? Because
So-
you want the juice or you want the
I
other
want
stuff?
I want all the pulp, everything but the seeds and the
Seeds and skins are coming out into here.
skins and comes out the other
Hey, the
side.
flies are coming out too.
The little fruit flies.
Oh yeah, they come right out of the screen. You're pretty good, Regina.
Thanks.
Want me to do that?
But yeah, so we may have to get the other.
The big bug screen?
Different size
Yeah, because
mesh.
I can see the elderberry seeds are all coming out.
So you have different attachments you can put on.
Where's the gear?
Regina, I want to know how you clean that.
We have this really nice sprayer.
Oh, you use the outdoor hose on something like this. Is what I was doing. This food processing problem.
And a bristle
Food processing equipment, getting power behind it.
I'm about to get a squeeze.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that helps.
Where'd you get it from, Lehman's?
You can. They sell it through Layman's.
Biggest
Yeah.
challenge of using this is cleaning it.
I got a huge apple tree full of apples.
You had to
Not
clean it
very
right
good.
away. It was sitting for a little bit, so it got kind of.
I think more or less this other factor besides, age and fermenting it, building protein and so forth, and building nutrition, is sort of this aesthetic and like what I find hard is like how much energy goes into frozen food, and it comes out of there just worse for wear. You know what I mean? Rarely do you freeze anything that comes out better. And so I think lots of these preservation techniques are about finding that superior flavor and superior quality. Like looking for those beans that are coming out that have been properly canned. You just don't compare to a frozen bean. A soggy, floppy frozen bean.
They make it easier for us.
It's chewy. You know what I mean? So there's just the quality is higher, the nutrition is higher, and the fossil fuel footprint because that refrigerator is just running, or the freezer is just running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for the duration. Whereas lots of these techniques, it's sort of a one-time energy input, and then it sits on the shelf till you're ready to use it, which is beautiful.
Especially fermented food, where you're not even using inputs to scan and all that.
Come down. I cook them first. I cooked all this together, the elderberries and the apples, cooked them down until they were super soft. And then, yeah. So it doesn't burn on the bottom.
So about how long you figure?
they were
I
soft,
cooked
you
those
said.
for a few hours. Let's say it was a few hours. This is a pretty big pot. So
You cooked it right in this pot right
Add
here?
some water?
I maybe only added a teeny bit of water on the very bottom so it wouldn't scorch.
Just to get them started.
And then it produces all of its own juices, especially the elderberries. I like to mix the elderberries with the apples because it makes the elderberries a little easier to process. I really like the elderberries, but they do have that little seed. And if I have found that if you stick them through a food mill to try to, take them from the seed and just get the juice and pulp, it makes this really sticky, gooey, resiny sort of thing, and it gums up everything. And you can maybe do just a few passes, and then you got to clean it all out. A few passes, it's just a lot of seeds. So I decided one time to try if I mixed it with the apples, what would happen, and I think the apples just help it flow through all together all at once. So, and then it makes a really beautiful color, and it tastes really good. You get two awesome things for.
So you're getting the juice on one side and the pulp on the other.
I'm getting the juices and the pulp. So you can see here, all this pulpy stuff.
Yeah.
That's coming out this end, and on the
Well,
other
you get
end
the
is the
skins and the
skins
seeds.
and the seeds, and maybe a little extra is coming out. But
And what are you gonna do with that?
this we'll heat up again. We'll cook a little bit, and then we can can it.
Okay.
And
Now,
it'll stay
what do you
all
use it
winter.
for? Like what's...
Oh, then you can spread it on bread. You can eat it with pancakes. You can just eat it.
like make
You
it
can mix-
crumble or some sort
Yeah.
of dessert, some sort of pie?
Yeah, you can mix it with.
And the rest of the stuff you're just getting rid of.
Yeah, feed it to
Organic.
the pigs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pigs love that. Tomatoes too.
Yeah. So yeah, if you want to do
All right, I'll do it.
a ladle in there,
I'll do it.
and you might have to use the special, just kind of
Yeah, no problem.
keep poking it down and bringing it through.
I don't like
And
pigs have never liked that.
Donuts.
So you have a couple people working.
yeah, I think we have a couple people working there. And then this.
They know what they're doing.
I get a lot.
Let's see. Well, I'd like to take out the core.
We get a lot of breeding. My one
I
son.
guess we don't have to get to.
What are you gonna, these are the apples that you're gonna.
We're gonna dry.
Right.
So we can get more people doing this. We got paring knives, a couple knives. Anyone else want to cut?
Apple slicers.
Let me just.
You're right. I was just thinking maybe this could be separate.
Good job, guys.
Hey, this flash.
Yeah, some not particular designs about that.
So what's this thing called now?
These are
You don't add a question? What is this considered? What kind of machine is it?
It's a food mill.
Yeah, it was the brand that
This is when you get ready for an EMP strike. This will work even with television.
Keep that in mind.
Josh, I'm coming up here when shit hits the fan. I'm telling you.
You should come up before the shit.
Well, I'll do that too. I'll be your chief of security.
There's two answers to that question. The shit has already hit the fan. Come on.
I'll be your chief of security.
I feel secure.
Can we pay you to come visit?
I gotta go pick a bug ferment.
So then,
I need to think that.
so Josh, here's my next question. When you can this, you just put it in a jar, right?
It goes in the jar, but then there's also a process to the canning to help seal the ingredients.
Oh, okay. So you don't lose any nutritional value in this one. You're gaining nutritional value.
I'm not sure you're actually
Hello.
gaining. You probably actually do the
Hello, Doug.
through the canning
Hello, Matt.
process, through the cooking process.
You having fun with the video camera? I am.
You actually
Is this how you get out of doing any work for the rest of the afternoon?
I've been holding this thing. It's heavy.
I can imagine.
Most things you can do hot water bath can. Usually it's like pickles, jams, and jellies. You can do tomatoes and salsas, as far as I've read.
Yeah, that seems to be new. What I heard about not doing it that way is new.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've done 30 years now. I've been doing tomatoes. We never had a problem.
I think it should be fine.
Yeah.
But I'm not a
Concern is the acidity of the
Right,
tomatoes.
I'm just going to eat in that too.
Yeah.
You can increase the acidity, right, by adding lemon.
Little lemon.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that is the concern. You want a certain acidity because people are afraid of bacteria, in particular botulism, they like to, they can still survive at pretty high temperatures. And so even if you are doing a boiling hot water bath can, it does not reach a high enough temperature to eliminate the botulism bacteria. And the only way that you can do that is by using a pressure canning system, which gets it up to a much higher temperature than you can with boiling water. And so if you want to, let's say, do canned green beans, which I did 1 year because I just really wanted to try it. The only way that you can do that is with a pressure canner. You can't do a boiling water bath because there is absolutely no acidity in the actual green bean vegetable. And so, and if you're wanting to just have green beans, not a pickled bean, then you need to bring the temperature up even higher.
Now, once you do that, though, aren't we taking some of the nutritional value out of them? A lot of the stuff that I'm reading saying any time we're using a pressure cooker, it's almost like using a microwave and they're bringing it.
Yeah, it's definitely not my favorite method, and even though I was using the pressure canner, I still had to keep it going I had to keep it up on the stove for 45 minutes, and that seemed like a really long time to me. And I'm interested in limiting the amount of time that I've got something boiling, or gas going on the stove if I have to. I suppose I could have done that with wood. I think it would have been a lot harder to really keep it cranked. Pressure canner really needs that, constant heat. I think I'd have a little bit harder time doing that on wood, but I've never tried that. I don't know that I would want to. But.
So, I guess for me, pressure cooking is just a little scary, but it seems like it's necessary with certain recipes,
Yeah, well, it depends if that's what you want to do, or if you want to do carrots, any kind of vegetable that has, just basically, if you want to just can a veggie, like carrots, green beans, if you want to do meat, if you want to make canned meat, you have to use a pressure canner.
So, doing like green beans.
Doing what?
Doing like green beans, and we're not going to want to freeze them. You're really talking about pressure canning or pickling, right?
Yeah, green beans. You can dry green beans. I've never done that before. Maybe worth a try. The green beans that were in the soup were frozen green beans. It was just a quick flash boil into cold water immediately to stop them from cooking. They stay nice and bright green, and then let them drain so there's not, I think if you don't let them drain, that causes a lot of the mushy problem when you take them out. You want to try to make them as dry as possible, and then when you put them in your plastic bag or whatever, and then into the freezer, then they're less likely to come out kind of gross.
So
that's my experience.
As far as tips for keeping the aesthetic and keeping the flavor and everything when you're freezing, that's what you're referring to, yeah?
Yeah, so once you before you put things in the freezer, like greens, green beans, even I've done garlic scapes. You do a quick boil. I usually don't like boiling unless it says in the recipe in particular to do it longer than a minute and a half. It seems long enough if it's really boiling to kind of, kill bacteria, shrink. If it's greens, it like shrinks it down just enough. And then you've got some cold water that you then immediately immerse your vegetable in. That quickly stops the cooking process, cools it down, and it helps it to retain that nice, maybe bright green color or whatever it is.
This is really the only way we've been able to salvage like greens like kale through the winter effectively in volume. Yeah.
I've heard of people taking their whole kale plants and putting them in the root cellar, kind of like they can do with cabbage. I've never done it before, but I can't imagine it lasting as long just because the leaves seem to need a little bit more, energy and juice. Whereas the cabbage has got this nice, compact, solid head, and it takes a lot longer for it to dry out. Let it drain, and if it's kale or collards, you can just squeeze out the excess water. Again, that loses some of your nutrients, like was said before, like you're basically squeezing out some of those nice vitamins that come out in the water that are immediately released.
The juice is green.
The juice is green. You probably could use like a distilled white vinegar. That's acid enough. I don't know if it does the same thing like with what I'm trying to do with the apples here, but I have actually added some cider vinegar to tomatoes before, or like a tomato sauce, just to kind of make sure I'm boosting the acidity just a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, lemon is obviously ideal, but we can't grow that here. So I don't have an substitute other than maybe some kind of vinegar. When I do other berries, like we grow blueberries and raspberries and blackberries. Sometimes I like to mix them all together, but sometimes I like to have just blueberries. And I actually just, all I do with those is make sure I have sterile jars. And sterilizing jars is pretty easy. Some people say, I've never had a dishwasher, but some people say that you can do it in a dishwasher. I am not sure about that. I guess it just depends on how hot your dishwasher goes. And
Some of the newer dishwashers have it sterilized. It's like,
yeah. But I just have it in the pot, and the water just needs to boil for a minimum of 10 minutes, like straight. And then, of course, I wash the jars first, then put them in the water, and let it boil for at least 10 minutes, and then they can sit in that warm water until I'm ready to use the jar. And so if I'm doing something like raspberries, I cook the raspberries down until they're a consistency that I really like. And it's usually just until they're, they've broken down, and it just creates a nice sort of sauce kind of look to it. And then, so I've got that nice hot liquid, I've got my nice hot jar, and I just ladle it in. A clean ladle, a clean lids.
Focus.
And then I just let that cool on the counter.
Determination.
And it self-seals all on its own.
Douglas.
And I've opened things the next year and have had no problem at all. Yep.
And you have to get the lids brand new, right? The one that goes on it correctly?
I prefer to do that. I have reused lids before.
You okay?
But I was just convinced to get new lids just from all the books I was reading, and just from also seeing the used lids and seeing what they look like, and not really. I mean, this is basically like a little porous kind of material in there. You don't really know what has gone on there, and you also don't really know maybe there is a slight there could be a slight nick in your lid. You know, there could be a number of imperfections that have happened to your lid once you've used it. And so I feel like it's worth the expense to just, you know, not risk it and just use some new lids like this.
What about the jars that have that the rubber ring, the glass top that flips down?
Yeah, I tried. I experimented with those because I was like, man, I don't want to keep buying new lids. But so I should have done something maybe a little less like risky, but I decided to can tomatoes in some of those, and I did it actually in a pressure canner. And the thing with those is a lot of times you're finding those kinds of jars, the wire rim jars at, you know, yard sales, old barns, you know, and so they've been around. So the things you have to really worry about are whether the wire is, you know, it's not bent, that it will properly actually like hold the glass piece to the
What if you just had new ones and you can still do the same thing, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Do they sell new ones? I don't know that they do.
Yeah, I got them on there.
Yeah, they sell them. They're expensive if you can buy them. They're like $10, $15 each sometimes. Like
it was, you know, and to me it felt like it was just a little more risky. If you're buying new ones, maybe that's...
I think we're going to use ours. We got a ton of them. We're going to use them for fermenting and
yeah, that's right. Because we have tons of them.
Can you buy just a new rubber piece?
Yeah, you can get that too.
Yeah.
but it's too easy for especially that top piece to be chipped. And I don't know.
It's compromised.
You definitely have to be, if you're looking at them, you know, you definitely have to be pretty meticulous and, you know, I mean, even if I had a rubber ring there, I think that, I mean, I definitely would use this one, but, they do sell, I should have brought them up, but maybe I can grab them in a little bit. They do sell some reusable lids these days that fit on just regular mason jars like this. Maybe I'll grab them in a minute, but it's a plastic piece that you know, is just the size of one of these, and then it actually has a separate little rubber ring that fits onto, and then you use just the regular screw cap ring to hold it together. And as long as you keep those pieces, then you can keep reusing them over and over again. And I used some of those last year, and they were great. They are a little bit more expensive, but they're also lasting you know, a number of years. I don't know what the lifespan is supposed to be, but I think it's supposed to last a while.
So now, Regina, this you got over here is apples and elderberries. What are you going to do with this thing?
Yeah, so we'll cook it a little bit more and get it a little thicker.
Okay. So
and then I'll just can it.
So you're
we'll do the same I'll bring up the apple butter and we'll do that same process.
Okay.
So yeah, it's just like applesauce.
Yeah, like an applesauce and apple butter.
Yeah, it is. They are really nice. They make regular and they make wide mouth.
Does it pop like the same way the metal ones do?
No, that's the tricky. That's the tricky thing. That's the only thing I do. I mean, I like that you can reuse them, but the thing what you actually have to do when you take it out, I think you let it sit, and then you have to like test it by lifting it up, and then it's sort of like, oh man, well if it lifts up, like my jar hasn't sealed, I gotta like do it all over again, and that's kind of, you know, if you have one can, I guess you could, you know, just put it in the fridge and eat it later, whatever it is, but.
Well,
yeah,
you taste the
there's
difference.
a
Though.
potential.
If you open it up and you smell right, it tastes right. You know it's.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Sometimes you don't. You can't. I mean, supposedly you can't tell. Usually, you can tell if something is bad. I mean, maybe it's fizzing or it's off. If you ever think that something is a little bit funny, like this is what they say, like when you're doing fermented foods, because sometimes you can't really tell what's good and what's not because everything's sort of fizzy. But I've definitely made a couple of fermented foods that weren't so good. But just like, you know, if you just barely touch something to even just your lip or just like your tongue, just barely, and if it's just sort of like, you know, feels funny, tingling in a weird, different way, or something like that, then it's probably not good to eat. But yeah, if you're ever worried about, if you open a jar and you're ever worried, just
Test it on your neighbor.
no, don't eat it. Just don't eat it.
No.
If you're just not sure, just toss it. I mean, I've done that.
These
with
gotta be
some
cheap.
things.
These have.
I can get one more tray, but we want to lay out these apples. Just try to maybe get one layer, not too meticulous, like, doesn't have to be like this, but just so there's not too many all crowded on top of each other.
Butter?
This is apple butter, yeah.
Cool.
So this was like overflowing, almost overflowing up to here yesterday, and I had it in the oven, and so it's really cooked down.
Cooked down.
It's about there. Once it stops fizzing like crazy.
Eat that little piece right there. It's like
We didn't have any beef.
caramelized.
I let them sit out
Yeah.
for about a week.
Yeah, that's what I do.
And grind them up and put them in the carboy. And that was
Yes, that'll be happening very soon at my house.
Yeah, the exhaust smells great on it. Like it's getting there.
Yeah.
So we get a really low dry temperature going.
It's all right. They're fine. They can handle it.
Stick our apples in there.
They get nervous when I jump. They get nervous when I chop.
We don't want it to be above 150 degrees, so we're really trying. It's not a fire really. It's just a little bitty thing we're going to light occasionally. What I'm doing is coming along the feeling of it, seeing how warm it is. I don't want it to burn my hand right now by any means. I want it to be warm. So that's what we're
Slowly
going
trying
for.
to get the water content out of the
Yeah,
apples.
just baking the moisture right out of them at a very low temperature.
So like if you're making pickles, a lot of times you can do a raw pack. So you're packing your cucumbers in there with your seasonings on the bottom, and then you've got some kind of a hot brine, which is generally like a vinegar solution, a vinegar with water. So it's just like a brine solution that you've got heated up. And so then you've got your jars all ready to go, and then you pour your hot brine into your jars, and then you get it into your boiling water bath to start coming up to temperature to actually boil. So you don't have to. It is probably a good idea to not stick your jar directly into boiling water, and it's okay for it to actually come up to temperature. If the water is already fairly warm, you put your warm jar with your warm liquid in it into your warm water, bring it up to the boil, and then if it says in your recipe that you need to have it on a hot water bath, or usually it says process for 10 minutes or process for 20 minutes. That timing point is when you actually see the water start to boil. Boom, you turn on your timer, then you process it for boiling for 20 minutes or 10 minutes, whatever it is. So I just am bringing this up to some heat here again because it had kind of cooled down in the oven. And I already sterilized these. I let them boil for 10 minutes, but I got them, the water's still pretty hot in there, so the jars are nice and warm. But I'm turning it on just a little bit, just to keep us moving along. But tools that are really good, a really nice stainless steel funnel is a good idea. These jar grabbers are a really good idea. I remember not having those, and I was using like things like this. It's not as nice, but it's definitely worth the investment to use something like this. And a good ladle. I can't find the other ladle I have. I have a nice seamless stainless steel ladle, and that's also really nice. And then you want to have your rings on hand, as well as some kind of clean cloth, so that you can wipe any goop or residue that may have gotten on the outside of the rim of the jar. Because if anything is, I had jars that weren't sealing, and then I opened it up and I realized it was like the tail of the garlic scape had like somehow bloop, snuck out, sitting on the rim of the jar, and then my jar didn't seal. So you really want to make sure they're all add all
Hey,
sorts of things.
you guys watching YouTube? I gotta tell you something. DAcres, place to be.
And you can can
Next
this
April,
too
don't miss it.
to preserve it for a long